Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my best books of 2023. Okay, obviously this is a little belated. Everybody was doing their best books of 2023 back in December or January. This is my big booktube comeback, so obviously I've got to catch you guys up on what I read all of last year. Some of this might be a little bit outdated, but you know, it is what it is. So up first and foremost, from the earliest part of the year, one of my favorite books was Tress of the Emerald Sea. I know last year I did manage to get up a couple of the Sanderson box unboxings, and then life got a hold of me and I just couldn't keep up with them, and then I wasn't able to film anything for a while, but it's fine. All of the boxes were really great. I had a great time with pretty much everything that came out of the year of Sanderson. A lot of cool stuff came out of those boxes. I did not keep up with filming any of the rest of the year, but I can tell you guys I enjoyed the year of Sanderson immensely, and you will be able to see a ton of the things that I got out of those boxes on my shelf. Back to the important thing, Tress of the Emerald Sea was such a fun surprise. I don't even really know how to describe my feelings when I was going through this book. It gripped me from the very beginning, which is really saying a lot because when this came out, I had a 1.5-week-old, maybe, January 1st. So Jack was 9 days old, and I managed to finish this somehow, some way. I don't know. It was amazing. I loved it from the very first page, and I loved Tress. I loved all of the characters. I loved that it was coming from Hoyd's point of view, which was unexpected, and the storyline was just so fun and whimsical, and the writing style was just unlike anything Brandon Sanderson has ever done before, and all of that just kind of meshed perfectly into not just my favorite book of 2023, but Tress is one of my favorite books of all time. Especially out of all of Sanderson's writing, I loved everything about this. It gave such a fun, whimsical fairy tale vibe that was really similar to if you read Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. I think that you would really like this as well. So the book obviously follows Tress, or as her name actually is, Glorf, but she's never actually called that throughout the entirety of the book. Everybody just calls her Tress. You follow Tress, who has started to fall in love with the governor's son, even though he's not really representing himself as the governor's son. But one day he leaves, and it turns out that he has supposedly married a princess in another isle, even though he promised her that he was going to do everything that he could to dissuade all of these princesses from wanting to marry him at all. And she thought that he'd succeeded until he stopped sending her gifts. She decided that she was going to chase after him because this was so out of the ordinary for him that she was just going to try and find him anyway. And she escapes from the Isle in the Emerald Sea by sneaking onto a ship. And the important thing about this is that the oceans in this world are not really oceans. Like, they're not water. They are actually made of spores that come from the moons in the sky. Which sounds crazy. I know, it does. But the moons release these spores, and there's so many of them that they form these oceans, and they are able to be sailed upon because there are gaseous pockets underneath these oceans that kind of create a wave-like effect on the spores, making it able to be sailed upon. It's crazy. It's so strange, and yet somehow it still works. And it was so much fun from beginning to end. Tress of the Emerald Sea, I gave it 5 stars. I reread it again. I recommended it to everybody that I could convince to read it. And if you haven't read it yet, definitely check it out because I think that it is one of Brandon Sanderson's best books of all time. Next up is not going to be all that unexpected. However, I don't know that my opinions are changing necessarily. I'll just get right into it. Okay. I read Fourth Wing last year, and I, like everybody else in the bookish world, absolutely devoured it. I read this book in like a day and a half. I was reading it on ebook, I was reading it physically, I was reading it on audiobook, anything that I could do so that I didn't have to stop reading it while I was still going about my daily life. I ate this entire book up. Violet and Xaden were adorable throughout the entire thing. I even managed to get this copy. Don't ask me how. They still had it on Amazon when I was ordering it. They are not available anymore, and yeah, Violet and Xaden, the whole storyline behind Fourth Wing, I'm not gonna harp on this too much because obviously everybody has heard of this book at this point. It is blown up on Book Talk, it is blown up on BookTube, it is everywhere in the bookish community. Fourth Wing owned my soul for a solid portion of last year, and I could not wait until Iron Flame came out. And I'm not going to say that I necessarily feel the same way about Iron Flame. It definitely took me well over a month to actually read the sequel to this. We'll see how I feel when the third book comes out. It's possible it's just a chance of second child syndrome. But if you take Fourth Wing by itself, it was definitely one of my best books of last year, if only for the vibes alone. I'm not going to say that it has the best writing style that I've ever read. I'm not going to say that it has the most original plotline that I've ever read. I will say that Dane is trash, and I continue to feel that Dane is trash, and that Jack Barlow can go screw himself. But other than that, it was exactly what I needed to read at the perfect time, and that is why this part of the series is going to remain one of my favorite books for a while. We'll see how the third book makes me feel about the rest of the series, like I said. But yeah, I mean, do I recommend Fourth Wing to people? Sure, if you are somebody that also likes to read ACOTAR, yes. If you are a heavy fantasy reader and you are expecting amazing writing style, maybe not. Maybe avoid this one. It's definitely more on the romantasy side than the fantasy side, but it was still a fun time. This one was a little bit of a surprise for me, but I had a really fun time with it because it was so unique, and that is The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon. I picked this up on a whim from my local bookstore, and anything that really stuck out to me last year when I was in my new parenthood haze is something that deserves to get talked about, because my reading, especially in the beginning half of last year, was kind of at an all-time low. And so the fact that I managed to pick this up and finish it and remember it, which is a big thing, definitely deserves to get talked about. So this follows Heart and Mercy. Mercy is an undertaker in this fantasy world. Essentially, it means the exact same thing. They take dead bodies and they prepare them for whatever ritual needs to be done to move on, or for their families to move on, or whatever. And because of this, she interacts a lot with Heart. Heart is a marshal. He is tasked with patrolling the fantasy lands, especially in the places where people don't generally travel, because there are, I don't think they were called shades, but they're kind of like a zombie situation. But they're not called zombies, and I don't necessarily remember what they are called. But he is a marshal. He's tasked with patrolling the wilds of this land, and because of that, he does come across some dead bodies, and he takes them usually to Mercy's family business to be taken care of, even if these people don't have anybody to pay for them, because that is a service that they provide as a charity. And they both, this is definitely enemies to lovers. This is also, by the way, definitely romantasy. And so I don't even know how to describe the magic system in this book or the fantasy world in this book. It's wild. There are these creatures that are specifically tasked with delivering mail. I'm pretty sure one of them is described, in my head, he's a giant bunny. And I know how that sounds, but it's a little bit less ridiculous when you're actually reading it, I promise. And it was honestly whimsical and fun. So anyway, these creatures are tasked with delivering mail, and somehow they know exactly, it's part of their magic, they know how to find whoever they need to find to deliver the mail to. And one day, Hart writes a letter because he's feeling lonely, just simply addressed to a friend. And he just kind of pours his heart out in this letter, and he writes it and he sends it off in like a, I don't know, their mailbox system, I guess, and somehow that letter gets delivered to Mercy. He doesn't realize it, she doesn't know who it's from, he doesn't sign it as himself, and they just kind of start a pen pal relationship, where they start to fall for each other through these letters, but neither of them knows who it is. Meanwhile, they're meeting in real life, interacting in real life throughout their work, and continuing to despise each other. Their relationship grows through these letters, and then finally, obviously, they realize who each other is, and it's just, it was cute. It was a fun time. It was a different world. I definitely would read more if Megan Bannon wrote more in this world. I haven't actually checked to see if there's anything else, but I had a great time. I really enjoyed it. It was such a sweet story and such a unique fantasy world building element that I enjoyed it immensely. Another book that I was late on the reading train for was Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This blew up everybody's world. I want to say in 2022 when it came out as just cozy fantasy, and it's exactly that. It was such a cute little story, low stakes, but still in a fun fantasy world. You follow Viv, who is an orc, and she is done with the mercenary life. She's done with fighting. She's done with killing things. She just wants to settle down and make a coffee shop and build a business in her retirement. And she takes all of her winnings, or whatever, payment from her mercenary life, and she puts in some orders, and she goes and picks a place, and she builds a coffee shop, and you just kind of follow her trials and tribulations as she starts being a new business owner in this fantasy world. She picks up friends along the way. She's doing construction work. She's trying to figure out supply and demand in a place where nobody knows what coffee is because it's not typical to this area. She's trying to bring a unique take to like the coffee shop kind of business, and it was just so much fun. There are stakes, low stakes, but there are stakes. There is an antagonist. I'm not going to tell you all about that, but it was a really fun time. And because it was a really fun time, I read this towards the end of 2023, and then I immediately moved on to Bookshops and Bone Dust, which is kind of like a prequel to Legends and Lattes, even though the epilogue of it works as an epilogue to Legends and Lattes. And if you read them, you'll understand what I mean. But I need there to be more. I need there to be a third one that follows that epilogue, because I had such a good time with all of these characters. It was such a sweet, fun fantasy read. It was a great time. I fell in love with all of these characters. I was so invested in the success of this coffee shop that I wish that it really existed so that I could go and sit there and read myself. So yeah, I mean, if you slept on this like I did for the longest time, definitely go check it out. Travis Baltree did a really great job building this cozy fantasy genre, building this cozy fantasy vibe, and it's kind of all I want to read right now, because it's just like, you don't have to think about it. You just read it, you enjoy it. There's no like intense world building that you really have to worry about taking notes on or like remembering or anything like that. It was a good time. This last one I don't actually have a physical copy of, although I really need to get my hands on one. But I read it on KU, and I read this entire series on KU actually, but the one that I'm specifically going to pick out to talk to you guys about is called Caught Up, and it's by Liz Tomford. This is a sports romance series. It all takes place in Chicago. I think it's called the Windy City series. The first book follows, it's hockey romance, and it follows a woman who is a flight attendant, and she gets assigned permanently to Chicago's hockey team's like airplane to be the flight attendant for the team, and she ends up falling in love with one of the hockey players. That one was really good. The next one, I believe, follows her twin brother, who is a star basketball player for one of Chicago's teams, and he ends up falling in love with the woman from the first book's best friend. But the third one is the one that really stuck out to me, and I think because it hit a little bit close to home, just because it's about a single dad who is trying to do everything that he can to do the best for his kid, and he is a star baseball player for Chicago's team, whose kid got dumped on his doorstep at 6 months old, and the mom disappeared, and so he's been trying and struggling and failing to find a nanny for his child that can take care of him while he's obviously being a pro baseball player, which takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of time on the road, so on and so forth. And yeah, so he is just kind of struggling, and the manager of his baseball team is like, hey, why don't you just take some time, and my daughter is between jobs right now, so why doesn't she watch your kid for you, and I get to spend time with her, and it's a win-win situation. So he's not really like paying her or anything, but she is his kid's nanny for the entirety of the summer. And just watching like the interactions with the son, and watching like their interactions together, it hit really close to home. It was really sweet. It was a good time, and I really identified with like both of them as parents, just kind of discovering all of the new things that their kid is doing, and like anytime that he spent away from his son, he like really struggled with, and I kind of had to deal a lot with that last year, and so it struck a chord, and it was my favorite book in the series by far. I don't know who the fourth book is going to follow, but I think that I'm going to continue to read anything that Liz Tomford puts out. So if sports romance is your thing, definitely check out this series. Like I said, my favorite one is Caught Up, which is the third one. I've reread it several times at this point. Several of the passages that, like, let's be honest, okay, the prose is not amazing. It's sports romance. If you're going into sports romance expecting stellar writing style, stellar prose, whatever, I don't necessarily think that that's the genre for you. But it was emotional and it was fun and it was not necessarily lighthearted, but it definitely was a good time. I enjoyed everything in that series, especially the third one. Alright guys, so that is it for me today. Those are my 5 best books out of 2023. Keep an eye out because I will be putting up my worst books of 2023 at some point soon here. Hopefully within the next few days, within a week, something like that. But that is it for me today, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to. Down in the description box, you're going to see links to my Goodreads, my Twitter, and my Instagram in case you wanted to follow me on any of those. That's it for me today, guys. Bye!